Welcome to DLS's Instructor Training Series on Developing Reading Skills, Part 1, Making Reading Interactive. By the end of this session, you will be able to identify 4 different reading skills, describe how to use pre-reading, reading, and post-reading to make students active readers, and evaluate reading activities from textbooks, and suggest adaptations where appropriate. Let's begin by thinking about how we read in our first language. So in this next section, focus on how you read in your L1, or if you're bilingual, focus on how you read when reading not for educational purposes, so not for teaching. Imagine that it's Sunday morning and you've got your coffee or your tea and you are looking through the newspaper. You come across an opinion piece about a recent event in your country. Before deciding to read it closely, you read through it quickly to get a general idea of the main points. What type of reading is this? This is skim or gist reading. This is when we read something quickly just to get the gist, to get the main ideas. Now, imagine that you are following a new recipe for a dish you've never made before. You want the dish to be perfect, so you read the recipe slowly, thoroughly, and very carefully, really paying attention to all of the details. What type of reading is this? This is close reading, or reading for details. And this is a kind of slow reading where we really try to understand as much as possible in the text. Now, imagine that you're online shopping for groceries. You look through the website quickly to find the specific things that you want to buy. What type of reading is this? This is scanning. So this is another type of fast reading, and here you're not trying to understand the whole text or the whole website. You're just looking for specific items, specific things. Now, last one, you read an article, a newspaper article, that you begin to think is biased. You read it slowly and really carefully, and as you read, you ask questions like, who is this written for? What evidence is the writer leaving out? Does this article show both sides of the story? What type of reading is this? This is reading for inference, and of course, close reading or reading for details. Reading for inference is another type of slow reading, and that's when we try to read between the lines. So we try to read what isn't directly stated in the text. So what does this mean for reading in our L2? When we read, we use multiple skills and strategies, not just one. And how we read depends on A, the type of text we're reading, and B, our purpose. And then reading is non-linear. So we might read quickly or slowly. We might look over the whole text to begin with, and then we might jump back and forth as we read. And what does all of this mean for our students? When we work with reading skills and our students, we need to provide opportunities for our students to transfer their L1 reading skills to their L2. We need to expose students to a variety of texts. Just as they read in their L1, we want to provide that same variety in their L2. And then we want to provide activities that target specific skill development. And that's what we'll look at in this next section. So, as you probably know, each reading activity that we do with our students usually has 3 stages. And what's the purpose of each stage? In the pre-reading stage, our purpose is to activate students' background knowledge and prepare the student to read. So here we want to see what the student already knows about the topic and get them ready to read it. In the reading stage, our goal is for the students to understand the reading text. But it's important to remember here that our students probably won't understand everything. And that's okay. That just means that the text is at an appropriate level for them. If they can understand most of it, but not all of it, then that's about the right level. That means that it's a little bit beyond their current level of understanding. And then, of course, the post-reading is where students get to respond to and react to what they've learned. So the content they've learned, maybe apply it to another situation. So let's look at examples of 3 pre-reading activities that you can do with your students. One great activity to do with students is to elicit background knowledge. And that just means getting students to say what they already know about the topic. So here you could have students read the title and just tell you what they know about this topic. Another great pre-reading activity is to preview the text. And that means having the student look at the title, look at any photos, maybe read the captions of the photos. And then they can use that information to predict what will be in the text. Now, sometimes students want to skip ahead and just start reading, but it is helpful to get them to look at the title and predict and tap into what they already know about this topic, because this is really helpful preparatory, these are really helpful preparatory steps. So one good way to get your student to pre-read is to perhaps just show them only the title and the picture, the main image or images. So you might do that even just by maybe cutting and snipping the title and one of the main images and just talking with the student about that before even showing them the whole text. Another strategy you can use for pre-reading is to provide your students with sentence starters. So here, for example, if you're reading this article in French about WhatsApp and you want your student to predict what will be in the text, you might give them some phrases and to help them predict. And this is a great tool if you want your student to do the pre-reading in the target language. So sometimes giving them a set of questions in the target language and then some sentence starters can be a great way to provide support or scaffolding if you're working with a lower level student or a student who's not used to doing pre-reading in the target language. Now, after you do your pre-reading, you might want to have a skimming activity, so just reading activity. And here's one example. There are many other skimming activities you could create, but you want to focus on the main idea, and you want your student to be able to read it fairly quickly. So you might give your student a matching exercise here. This newspaper article is divided into sections, so you might have the student read through the article quickly and just match the main idea to each section. If you wanted to do another fast reading activity with your student, you might have them scan the article. So you might pull out some numbers or some figures or dates here and ask the student to find these in the text and then tell you what these numbers and dates refer to. And that would be an example of a scan reading activity. And then finally, if you want to give your student a close reading activity, A great idea is comprehension questions. So you'll have some WH questions here, what, why, how, etc. And these are going to be really useful for reading for details. Let's start by looking at this example of a reading text from a Spanish course book. This course book is called Imagina, and this would be a text for perhaps a level 1 plus, maybe a level 2 student. And you can see there's the text here, a couple of pictures, and then we have some questions here. So just taking a look at this course book so far, what do you think? Do you think anything is missing from the 3 reading stages that we looked at in the previous section? One thing you might have noticed is missing is that the textbook doesn't include any pre-reading here. So that's something you would probably want to add to this text. And for pre-reading, you could do a few different things. You could have the student describe the photos and say what they see. Maybe they could identify the places in these photos. Maybe they've been there or the teacher has been there. The student could identify the topic, probably through the title, and then based on the topic, the teacher can then elicit background knowledge. So the topic is obviously the Cordillera of the Andes, so the Andes mountain range. And the student could just talk about what they know about the Andes, maybe identify which countries it runs through, and maybe talk about if they or a friend have ever been there. And then that would be a great pre-reading activity for this text. Now, let's take a look at the reading comprehension questions. We can see that we have several sets of questions here. And if you don't speak Spanish, it's a little hard to read, but these sets of questions here are close reading, reading for details, where the student really has to read carefully and try to get a lot of details out of the text. And then here, this is a post-reading discussion. So here the student talks about whether they would like to visit the places in the article, and they say why or why not. So here we can see a really complete reading activity with lots of close reading questions and then also a post-reading discussion. So this looks really great. If we wanted to add something to this text, we notice that the textbook doesn't provide a skim reading activity or a scan reading activity. So if we wanted to, we might add one of those. Here's one example of a scan reading activity that you could add. There are a lot of different ones that would work well here, but one possible one is to give the students a map and just have them circle the places that they see mentioned in the text. So here there are some national parks and specific cities mentioned in the text, and you might just have the student scan the article quickly and then find those on an accompanying map. And this way you have a map as well that's an added visual for the text. And that can be really helpful for some students if they're more of a visual learner. Now, let's take a look at a Chinese textbook. So this is Reading into a New China. It's a reading exercise from there, of course. So first of all, just thinking about pre-reading, and you may or may not speak Chinese or read Chinese, but just looking at this text, what features of the text would be useful for pre-reading here? So thinking about pictures, images, any charts or graphs, and then titles. So let's look for those. So we can see that there are 2 images here that would be really useful for pre-reading. maybe getting the students to describe those images, say what they see in the picture or what this is over here. Looks like a calendar with maybe a daily schedule. And then we can also see there's a title up here. So getting the student to read the title and predict what the text is going to be about. And then of course we've got these subheadings here, and those are going to give important information about the text. So getting the student to just read the subheadings and say, what do you expect to be in each section? And that would be a great pre-reading exercise. And even if you don't read Chinese, you can see this is about school children. So getting the student, and this one is in fact about the university entrance exam in China. So just getting the student to tell you a little bit about what they know about that exam and what they know about high school in China. And that would be a great pre-reading activity. And now that we've done pre-reading for this text, let's take a look at the reading comprehension exercises that come with this textbook. So that's these exercises right here. And let's look at what reading skills are practiced here. So you can see that the instructions are here and here in English. It's a little hard to see, so I've enlarged it for you. And here you can see that the reading skills are pretty straightforward here. Here the student needs to skim or read for the gist, and they have a multiple choice for the main idea. So they would probably do a quick reading using a lot of the information they've gotten from the pre-reading, and then choose the main idea. They should be able to do that fairly quickly. And then after that, they would come back here and we see we've got, this looks like reading for details. Maybe reading for inference, we'd have to look at the questions to know that. So then the student would come back and read this more slowly so they can answer these questions here. And then our last example is from an Italian textbook. You can see this is a lower level text, and you can probably understand the title, which is Stay in Shape, which you could probably also guess from the pictures. So let's take a look at what the textbook has here for activities. We can see there are two reading activities over here on the right-hand side. And we want to know what reading skills are practiced here. So we can see this is an activity where the students need to complete the sentences, and here they need to say true or false. So both of these are probably going to be reading for detail, because the student will probably need to read this text slowly and carefully to answer the questions. And then we can see here there's a nice, looks like a post-reading activity here. So it says your opinion, and it looks like they have to discuss their opinions or their reactions to the text. So we've got some good reading activities and a great post-reading activity. Is there anything you would add to the reading exercises here for this text? So you may have noticed that there's not really much of a pre-reading here. So one thing you might want to add, and there's no skim reading either, so one thing you might want to add is a pre-reading activity. So you would probably want to cover the text and just show the images and the title, and then tell the student to predict 5 things that are going to be in the article. And then after they have a moment to do that, you can turn your prediction activity into a skim reading activity. Ask them to skim the text and see which of their ideas are mentioned. So you kind of get 2 for 1 there. We hope this session is useful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know.